Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we try and unpack the news making the headlines in domestic politics. This week, we go to the poll-going state of Punjab, where a kind of truce seems to have been brought about in the ruling Congress party between Chief Minister Amarinder Singh and the newly appointed Pradesh Congress President Navjot Singh Sidhu, who was sparring all of the last couple of months, and pretty bitter sparring at that. This episode of Talking Politics will explore how this truce was affected, whether it will hold, and what kind of opportunity does it give to the other players in the state. Congress leader Navjot Singh Sidhu's appointment as the Pradesh Congress President was expected to blow up into a no-holds-barred confrontation between himself and the Chief Minister Amarinder Singh, who saw it as a way of undermining his authority in a state where the Congress has held power, one of the few states where the Congress has held power, and has good prospects going into the assembly elections next year. But a ramshackle kind of truce was affected. How was this truce affected? Well, Navjot Singh Sidhu's major show of strength when he visited Amritsar, his hometown, and to take blessings of the Harmandir Sahib, endowed with 62 out of the 80 MLAs of the Congress party, sent a message to Captain Amarinder Singh, who till then had maintained that unless he received an apology from Navjot Singh Sidhu for the bitter words that they had exchanged in the past, he would not be accepting his leadership. That show of strength did have a bearing on Captain Amarinder Singh making it to Chandigarh for the taking over ceremony at the Pradesh Congress Committee, along with the 4 working presidents that had been appointed by the AICC. Navjot Singh Sidhu had also sent a letter to Captain Amarinder Singh, inviting him for that ceremony. Again, this had 52 of the MLAs as 58 of the MLAs as signatories. Amarinder Singh is also getting on in age. He's in his late 70s. Probably that was also another factor that weighed on his mind and on the minds of the many MLAs who seem to have come out in support of Navjot Singh Sidhu. Will this truce hold, this kind of a ramshackle kind of a truce? Well, at the ceremony itself, there were portents of this being a very ad hoc sort of event that happened, this kind of a truce. The body language, if you look carefully at the footage from that meeting, appeared to be extremely stiff. Captain Amarinder Singh, when he spoke at the function, made it a point to stress on his seniority and his experience of the world vis-a-vis the young Sidhu. He mentioned that in 1963, the year that Sidhu was born, it was the year that Captain Amarinder Singh had been commissioned into the Indian Army, and that when he had come back after 6 or 7 years as captain and had decommissioned from the army, it was Sidhu's parents in Amritsar who were also part of the group who encouraged him to get into active politics. Sidhu, on his part, touched the feet of Rajinder Kaur Bhattal, senior leaders of the party, Rajinder Kaur Bhattal, Harish Rawat, who was the AICC in charge of Punjab, and Lal Singh, another senior leader of Punjab Congress, but did not do so with Captain Amarinder Singh. He spoke on governance issues, though he didn't use very strong words, but the signals were very clear. He spoke on the lack of closure in the Firozpur sacrilege case. He spoke about the unfinished war on drugs. He said that the real culprits had not been exposed yet, despite 4.5 years of Congress rule. And he also spoke on other general governance issues. Basically, the possibility of this truce holding will depend on a large amount when the campaign gets underway, when tickets are decided, because that's going to be a big conflict that's looming on the horizon for the Congress in Punjab, and how intensely will Captain Amarinder Singh campaign in the coming elections. In terms of political logic, one has to look at the events in Punjab in the larger space of Congress politics at the centre as well. Decimated by successive assembly and general election defeats, the national leadership of the party has been successively weakened, and therefore the Gandhis decided to intervene directly in the case of Punjab appointing who they felt was the most popular leader there as the PCC president. Sources tell us that Rahul Gandhi has made a decision that he will be pushing for popular leaders rather than consensus ones who he feels have not been as effective and have basically been kind of working of a way out of trying to please everybody and ending up pleasing nobody. 2 years after he gave up his position as Congress president, one can say at this point that Rahul Gandhi, by getting his people into positions of authority in state units, etc., has finally made this Rahul's Congress. The implications of what happened last week in Punjab are also felt in terms of the rivals of the Congress going into polls in the assembly elections. The Akali Dal BJP alliance has broken off. The Akalis are going into polls with an alliance with the Bahujan Samaj Party, with whom they had been an alliance many years ago before they tied up with the BJP. There is a very clear attempt from the Akali side, which usually advocates the Panthic side of Punjab politics, to appeal to the large number of Dalit voters, especially in Malwa. And these are also voters that the Aam Aadmi Party will be looking to attract, especially since the Congress seems to have put all its faith in the Jat Sikh leadership, having a Jat Sikh chief minister in Captain Amarinder Singh and a PCC president in Navjot Singh Sidhu. Aam Aadmi Party's only drawback at this point seems to be the lack of a face to go into the polls with. But it will be interesting to see how they plan to appeal to Dalit voters, especially in Malwa, and Hindu voters. This election in Punjab, with a divided Congress, a debilitated sort of Akali Dal, a solitary BJP, and a new force in Aam Aadmi Party, seems to have been split wide open and will be one of the more interesting contests to watch out in 2022. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next week.